Good morning, Davidson College community. My name is Alex Soltani. I'm a senior Middle Eastern Studies major on the pre-med track.
My name is Jacob Haythorne. I'm a junior political science and theater double major.
And welcome to the Alenda Lux Symposium. So we have here today Dr. Verna Case, who is the brains behind this whole symposium today. And so, Dr. Case, if you could go through a little bit of the schedule for the day and tell us about what we're going to be seeing throughout the day.
Thanks, Alex. And I am not the brains behind everything, but I have a great team behind me. So many that I can't mention all of them today, but a lot of people came together to make this event possible today. And so one of the things that we are trying to do is showcase all the wonderful work that students do across campus, from the arts to the sciences. And we have a number of different venues that are available, and there are events in those venues throughout the day. So it's a lot of students, over 660 students are participating today. And so that's, if you think about it, it's about a third of the student body here at Davidson. So it is, in fact, a great day to celebrate. The events are going on this morning and this afternoon, and at 11:30 we'll start a community lunch, which will be right here in Richardson Plaza. And a lot of people will hopefully partake of the great barbecue that we have planned. In addition to that, there will be some performances during lunch and the physics gravity race. Wow. So we're very excited about the whole day, and it's a lovely weather as well.
That's awesome. I guess we're going to start here with Jacob, and could you talk a little about your theater course that you're in right now and the monologues that will be ensuing?
Absolutely. So we just saw a few monologues done by the Theater 386 class, which is a voice and movement for the actor course, and our culminating project for the class was a Shakespeare monologue that we've been developing over the course of the whole semester. So I'm about to run up and, well, maybe he's putting mics back on the stage, but maybe I'll do it in front of the stage. I'm about to run up and do my monologue, which is a monologue from Julius Caesar. I am playing the character Mark Antony and giving a soliloquy mourning the death of my good friend Caesar. So let's go run up, see if they'll turn off the music for me, and we'll do some Shakespeare real quickly. Drop the music real quickly? Yep. To all our viewers, hang in there, folks. The music you're hearing right now is done by the digital composition class from the music department. It's a wonderful class where students get to use a whole bunch of technological resources available to them in the music department to design and create their own original work. So that's pretty cool. Can I use this one? Yeah, but can I just do it down here? Mic this from here and do it. Brilliant. So, again, this monologue is from Julius Caesar, and I'm playing the character of Mark Antony. Oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, that I am meek and gentle with these butchers. Thou art the ruins of the noblest man that ever lived the tide of times. Woe to the hand that shed thy costly blood. Over thy ruins now do I prophesy, which, like dumb mouths, do ope their ruby lips to beg the voice and utterance of my tongue. A curse shall light upon the limbs of man. Domestic fury and fierce civil strife shall cumber all of the parts of Italy. Blood and destruction shall be so in use, and dreadful objects so familiar that mothers shall but smile when they see their infants quartered with the hands of war, all pity choked with custom of fell deed. And Caesar's spirit, ranging for revenge, with Ate by his side, come hot from hell, shall in these confines with a monarch's voice cry, havoc, and let slip the dogs of war, that this fell deed shall smell above the earth with carrion men groaning for burial. Thank you. Not the happiest monologue for an early morning, but a piece that I am proud of and excited to share with you all this morning. So I'm going to pass it back to Alex Soltani here.
Awesome. So we'll be venturing over into the Lilly Gallery straight ahead in Chambers to the Civic Oratory Showcase. And this is a combination of both public speaking students as well as communication students performing speeches that they have rehearsed and written throughout the entire semester. So, Jacob, have you ever taken any communications or public speaking courses at Davidson?
I have not, just of the theater variety. Those are the only ones that I've done any speaking in, I guess. But I have known a lot of students who have taken them, and they do some pretty cool work over there. I'm not sure what the prompt was for these final presentations, but I've heard a couple of snippets from friends and whatnot, and there's some pretty awesome work happening over there. So
I'm excited. So we're walking in right now, and we'll be a little quiet. There's an audience that's sitting down, so we don't want to disturb.
Good morning. Welcome to our annual Civic Oratory Showcase. The purpose of our showcase, we don't need a microphone, we're fine, thank you. It's for social media. Our speakers are, do you need it for the video?
Yes, please.
They're ruining the embodied experience of public speaking. That's okay. The purpose of our showcase today is first to celebrate the hard work of our talented students. The second purpose is to celebrate and preserve the tradition of civic discourse. And sometimes when we turn on the television or the radio, we can be disheartened by how far our level of civic discourse has fallen. And so it's inspiring to see students engage each other in a way that is respectful and rigorous and challenges their audience members and their peers to be better. And so we're very proud of our 4 contestants today, all speaking on the theme of imagining social justice. Each person will address that theme from a different perspective. We also have 3 judges, tutors from our speaking center, who will go out and deliberate on the winners. So it's a great opportunity, as we said, to celebrate the spirit of civic discourse, but also to take us back and engage civic discourse from the traditional forum of being together with each other in real time, in real space, sharing a space with our bodies in a way that we lose in television, in multimedia today. And so it's really great to bring that tradition back. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker for you. Please give her a big round of applause. We have Marissa Meki giving her speech, Grandparents in Exile, Lessons for Social Justice on Latinidad, Intersectionality in Cuban History.
Years ago, I found myself in a peculiar position. I was on a boat with my family off of the coast of Miami between the United States and Cuba. What were we doing on the boat? Well, we were emptying the remains of a former travel agent and a foreman Cuban Unabomber into the ocean. Those were my grandparents, and that was their funeral. The location represented something important. It was the physical and metaphorical space that my grandparents occupied as Cuban exiles in the United States. My grandparents had fled the Cuban Revolution in the late 1950s. They had only left after my grandfather had been informed by a cousin in the Cuban intelligence that he was on a hit list due to his anti-Castro affiliations and actions, and that he had to immediately leave the Cuban country if he wanted to survive. So they left. They left abruptly, and they left with nothing. And their history is really what informs my perspective on my whole worldview. But I never lived in Miami. I never even grew up in Florida. My whole life I lived in Dunwoody, Georgia, at the intersections of whiteness, privilege, and Latinidad. On Dunwoody Club Drive, I found myself growing up with my dad's rich white family in a rich suburb of North Atlanta, and I found myself not really intact with my Latinidad or with that part of my life until I was much older. Rather than those intersections to be more geographically located, I was on Dunwoody Club Drive between Winters Chapel and Happy Hollow Road. However, I hung precipitously over the edge of my rich white upbringing, as I never really got off to gain perspective on Latinidad until recently. It was my grandparents who really helped raise me and who really gave me perspective and let me get over that edge and understand what my Latinidad meant and how it would inform my worldview. Growing up, I hated that I was Cuban. In my rich, suburban, Georgian lifestyle, everything that had to do with Hispanics had to do with Mexicans and had to do with Mexicans being bad. This sort of rhetoric was rife among children because we all know that children usually repeat what they hear, and what they hear is not necessarily informed because they are 7. And so I tried to distance myself from these people. I reasoned that I'm very white. I am the first Machado to ever be born with freckles. I wasn't really that Hispanic, so I was able to distance myself from that part of my life. I thought any comments I received couldn't be racism because I was white, and so that I didn't need to argue against them, I didn't need to justify them, and I didn't need to fight back because I'm white, that's not racism. It wasn't until I was older that I realized that what these comments really meant. Comments on my body hair, because we all know Latinas got that, or the kid on my debate team who called me taco for a whole year as a racial slur, the debate team I would then become captain of. So I kind of showed him. The point being that I was doing nothing to fight back against racism. I was trying to disassociate myself from my Latina identity as a way of protecting myself from the racism that I was experiencing, because I thought if I'm white, it can't be racism. And I'm not saying that I was, subject to horrible racism as a child. I am very white and privileged. But what I'm saying is that by not confronting this racist discourse, by not trying to advocate for my fellow Latinx community, I was failing. I was, objectively a terrible child in that sense, and that's horrible to say, but participating in racist rhetoric is not exactly what every, Cuban mom wants their child to be doing. And so it was my grandparents who were the ones who really gave me perspective on what it means to meaningfully engage with racism and to meaningfully combat those stereotypes for my community, to stand up for my fellow Latinx community. Throughout my life, and especially in the recent years since my grandparents have passed, I learned a lot about how they meaningfully and even quietly impacted their Hispanic community. A couple months after my grandfather died, I went to the mechanic, to fix my car. And my mechanic was furious that my mother hadn't told him that my grandfather had passed away, and I didn't know why that was. And it turns out that my grandfather had taken him under his wing for years and helped him start his own business. Similarly, I later found out after my grandfather's passing that he had gone out of his way to help a family friend of ours who was an undocumented immigrant who was threatened with deportation after having filed taxes for her cleaning business. My grandfather would go to each and every one of her meetings to translate for her in order to help represent her in the legal system and help protect her. And she's now in the United States still, and she says that that's all due to him. And lastly, my grandfather, after retiring, then became a translator for the city of Sandy Springs, and he would represent the Latinx community in the legal system by providing them with translating services and interrogations, or just in the whole litigation system. What I found out was that my grandparents weren't, dramatically changing the world. My grandparents were quietly engaging with their community in ways that recognized their privilege, their economic privilege, that they were well off by the end of their lives despite coming to America with nothing. They recognized they had privilege in that they knew English and that they were able to engage in the world in a different way than non-English speakers. My grandparents' social justice was one that was intersectional. It was one that was economically and racially intersectional. And I think that those lessons were some of the most important that I took away from my grandparents. It took me traveling 200 miles north of Atlanta to Davidson to gain even more perspective on why my grandparents' politics was the way that it was. This semester I took Dr. Benson's 1959 Cuban Revolutionary History class, and I found that I could see a lot of my family and a lot of my history in this course. In Dr. Benson's book, Anti-Racism in Cuba, The Unfinished Revolution, she discusses how Cuba tried to combat racism in the wake of the revolution. She discusses how they had a top-down approach. The government said that there are no races, there's only Cubans, and that they then went on to make a bunch of policies that would reflect this. However, I think my grandparents make the same argument that Dr. Benson makes in her book and would then continue to make in our class, which was that the top-down approach doesn't necessarily solve for how society views racism and how people interacted with those policies. I think my grandparents understood that, yes, I think the United States should do what Cuba did. We should enact civil liberties legislation, and we should try to make policy changes that reflect our values of anti-racism. However, I think that they understood that society also needs change, that we need to, on the ground level, change how people interact with each other, change hearts and minds, and change what we do in our everyday lives in order to combat racism. And I think Dr. Benson makes the same argument in her book as why Cuba hasn't finished the revolution, the anti-racist policies that they've really tried to put forth, because they haven't changed society yet. My grandparents were working on the ground in everyday life and believed that they had a lot to contribute as individuals to anti-racism. Reflecting on all my grandparents did in their lives, I realized that they gave me the most important lessons on social justice and on Latinidad that I could ever have received. I'll be the first to say I'm not the person to say, what an ally should be or what allyship should be, and that we as a society don't know what an ally is or even if we believe that that exists. I, from Dunwoody Club Drive, don't think I'm the one to be making those decisions. However, I think that I have lessons to give on social justice through what I have learned in my family. I'm still looking for ways to reach out and to listen and to understand social justice better. However, I believe my grandparents give us a fundamental framework to work off of, some initial ideas in order to figure out what we're going to do with social justice and how we can inform ourselves using our past experiences. When I go right, you go left, and we both hit walls, the labyrinth is not necessarily sympathetic to solutions. When we are trying to situate ourselves, whether it be from Dunwoody Club Drive or any of the other streets we grew up on or different experiences we bring to the board, we are also trying to understand social justice in our own ways. All I claim to know is that I have a privilege and that I can leverage that to help my other Latinx community. I can't tell you which roads to go down, maybe not Dunwoody Club Drive, but I can't tell you what roads to go down. But I can tell you that I don't know where traffic is going to be worse. That's because I'm from Atlanta, where traffic is the worst. And I can't necessarily tell you where to go in terms of social justice. We don't have any road maps, we don't have Google Maps or Waze, and we don't necessarily have a strict structure or plan or policies that we can enact that will solve all of our problems. So from my labyrinth at Dunwoody Club Drive, I ask you and myself the same question that is said to be Simone Bolivar's last words. How am I going to get out of this labyrinth? How are we going to solve social justice in that sense? And I think that Cubans and my grandparents alike don't necessarily have a plan so much as they have an affirmation. Si se puede, it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. So once again, that was a speech from the civic oration class focusing on issues of social justice.
Sorry about that. And so now we're heading over to the Wall Academic Center, and there'll be community-based projects and poster fair happening over there. Jacob, do you take many classes in Wall generally, or not really?
In my time of Davidson, I have had one class in Wall, and it was a poli-sci class condemned to the basement. So we are a bit of fish out of water on that one, because it is mostly science classes, but there are some statistics classes and other more technical classes that take place in Wall. It is a gorgeous building. I love studying there, personally. There's a lot of light during the day that you get in the main atrium, so it's really a beautiful place to spend your time and get some work done.
My favorite place on campus actually is, and we'll be passing through a little bit hopefully later, is that balcony right above the entrance to wall. So I tend to go up there and grab a few books and read when the sun's really nice and shining out.
I believe what we have here is we have a couple of the physics folks setting up the gravity race that again will be taking place during the lunch hour along with several student performances. Yeah, I'm honestly really curious to see what happens here. So far we've got just a long wooden ramp and harkens back to my days as a Boy Scout in the Pinewood Derby. So I'm excited to see what happens here during the lunch hour. Okay, we are now entering the Wall Academic Center, and it is bustling right now with folks presenting their community posters. Let's see, who are we going to talk to first? All right. Hey, sir. Oh. Hi, Sarah. We are currently live on Davidson College social media, sharing the different posters today. So do you want to just give us a quick spiel about y'all's work and what you have going on here today?
Yeah. I can kick it off. Sure. Check. Awesome. Okay, so we are in SOC 350, and our project is on exploring social class. So what we have here is a poster that kind of is a culminating social justice project or a continuing social engagement project. So what we did was we went into Charlotte to participate in a session called Meals, Minds, and Movements, which was put on by the Bahailo Academy. So the Bahailo Academy is a nonprofit institution in Charlotte that functions to give kids in Charlotte an after-school program, an after-school enrichment for their public school education in the form of creative work. So they participate in digital art, fine arts, performance arts,
mural painting.
Yeah, mural painting, whatever they want. And so what we did, the Meals, Minds, and Movements function as a kind of community-based discussion about social justice issues. And they would happen about once a month, and you get fed dinners. People from the community plus the students will come to discuss these issues. So our issue that we attended was about social class, and we listened to and participated in a discussion with members of the Charlotte community along with the Bahailo students. And this is kind of the form that it took. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
So we did we did a large group discussion when we got there, and we talked a lot about the perceptions of social class. So we kind of recreated what we did at Bahailo Academy with the perceptions. And so if you want to talk about the moving forward.
Yeah. So moving forward, we want them to be able to reach out. So the community often comes to them, but we want to have opportunities, suggest different opportunities for them to go reach out into the greater Charlotte community. And that's going to different events, either about city planning or city politics, or possibly going to different marches, to like the Women's March, or also going to different, like the Levine Museum. So going out and exploring different events that are often found in the Charlotte community. And then finally taking all this aside and taking what they learned, we're hopefully that the Bahailo Academy and their students can be able to come back and be able to have possibly a mini Alenda Lux their own, and have the students create posters based on thematic themes that they found throughout the different events, and they can have a mini Alenda Lux like what we're having here at Davidson College today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, y'all. So moving over here just across the way to a group that did work this past semester with a nonprofit called Trees Charlotte. And so we'll hear from them very shortly. Do you want to speak a little bit on Davidson social media about your project?
Yes.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Margot. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Rosalia.
And we were working with Trees Charlotte, which is a nonprofit out of Charlotte focusing on improving tree canopy in Charlotte. Their goal is to reach 50% tree coverage by 2050, and right now we're at 46%, but each percentage point represents 100,000 trees, and there are a lot of issues and challenges that the organization has getting to this goal. The trees are kind of old and sick, and also Charlotte is a really pro-growth city, so there's a lot of development. And there's a major issue Trees Charlotte faces is a lot of their corporate donors and corporate partners are in the development community, so they have to sort of combat that issue by like how do we continue receiving these donations while still maintaining our message. So that's one of the issues we looked at. We also looked at issues of environmental justice, and we worked with their community organizer Jen Rothaker, and sort of had to deal with working with other organizations focused on environmental justice, and also like preaching the Trees Charlotte message to these underserved communities who maybe need trees more, but also have a lot of other issues they're facing. So, for instance, they worked with the Refugee Support Service, and there were a lot of issues that came up, such as like language barriers and determining what place to put these trees, because a lot of times Trees Charlotte does plantings in one area. That doesn't really serve the community very well because the refugees are more spread out throughout the city. So we identified a couple of challenges, those being the two main ones, and also looked at some opportunities the organization could implement, such as like funding the community engagement officer position and really empowering their volunteer base to include more people. Yeah.
Thank you so much, y'all. We're moving over here now for one more poster. This is about Bahalu, which is an academy in Charlotte, founded in 2006, and they're proposing a theater-based... Well, you can speak more about it.
Hello. Hi. So this is this class is cross-listed, both communications and sociology, and we were given the task of attending a session of Bahalu Academy's Meals, Minds, and Movements. And essentially this is just an opportunity. They have these once a month for people of the community to come together to have conversations around a specific intersectional identity. So our class, or our group specifically, went to the session titled Big Boys Don't, Big Girls Don't, and we were split into several groups and given the task of just kind of dialoguing and discussing certain topics around gender identity, gender expression, and just kind of the expectations around what it means to be a boy and what it means to be a girl. So after that, we kind of had a major debrief and figured out what went well, what didn't work well for this particular group, and then we decided to come up with a proposal to introduce community-based theater into Bahalu Academy as a method of just kind of continuing this conversation, but also making sure that it's sticking with the general mission of Bahalu to just empower youth and find their voices through arts, academic support, and community service. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, just a little bit on community-based theater. The proposal is for workshops based on each of the specific topics to extend the conversation to be more less top-down. So Paulo Freire's basic theory is that it's not what's called the banking system of education, where it's not from a top-down authority to down to the lower, it's bottom up, and so that everyone's voices are heard. The facilitator isn't the expert on the experience, the individuals are the experts on their own experience, and so we hope to delve deeper into the issues that Bahalu is trying to discuss and bring up through workshops. And so we're going to propose a specific plan that they could potentially implement if they would like, and yeah, that's basically our project.
Thank you all for sharing. Sounds like a super cool project. Now we're going to go around the corner and see one more poster from the Social Sciences Fair, or from the Community Engagement Poster Fair, excuse me. Howdy, folks. Yeah, can y'all just introduce yourselves and then go ahead and just tell us a little bit about the project?
Hi, I'm Erin Gross. Rachel Hyanek.
Derek McKinney.
Daniel Fleer. Should I start? Okay, sure. So I'm researching how the role of the new links line will play out in NODA. NODA is already pretty fully gentrified, so I'm looking at how the links line is both exacerbating and ameliorating that development in terms of first attracting a lot more mixed-use urban commercial real estate that is actually hosting a lot of the places that have already been displaced during gentrification, while also raising property values in the area.
So I'm writing about the history of NODA in terms of demographics. So thinking about racial changes over time, and thinking about like why are people moving to Noda and like who is moving to Noda. Based on our research, Noda used to be a largely African American population, working class, because of the mills, and now it's a very rich white population that's moving in. As Daniel said, gentrification is there now, so I'm just thinking about how historically that has changed and what things have caused that change.
So I'm looking at the historical preservation of Noda and if its designation as a historic district either perpetuates or combats gentrification within the neighborhood. And I found that it's kind of a mixed bag. Some of the old mills from the area have been turned to affordable housing and others have been turned to high-rise condos. So it's kind of been a way to increase property values but also keep it affordable for some people moving in. So kind of both.
And I looked into how education is affected by gentrification, and I found that gentrification in Noda has displaced lower income families, and it forces them to send their children to lower ranked, lower quality schools. So basically there's this inequality that is happening between the classes.
Thank you all so much for sharing your work. We are now going to go back outside and wrap up. But once again, this has been the community poster fair. All of these projects were done by folks in the sociology department engaging issues that are very relevant today in the larger Davidson community, looking at Charlotte. That last presentation was looking at the North Davidson area of Charlotte, which is just a couple miles down the road from us. Let's see if we can successfully navigate. Oh, sorry. Right, thank you. So if you, as you probably saw on the way out there, it is absolutely packed. There are hundreds of students, faculty, and community members milling about and looking at all these really cool projects. Thank you for joining us for this next little bit.
Yeah, and we'll be here back at 1 o'clock p.m. and 3 o'clock p.m. sharing more different types of projects. Like we alluded to before, this is a very interdisciplinary day, so you'll be seeing projects from all different fields here at Davidson. And please go on to alendalux.davidson.edu to learn more about the schedule for the coming day and also share your experience at #AlendaLux. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you later this afternoon.